The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Speaker, I'm delighted to speak at this stage of the Charities Amendment Bill, and can I say to the member who's just resumed his seat that I can't imagine a bill or a Labour Speaker less likely to deserve such a nasty little quip from that member. Sometimes you need to rise above that sort of behaviour. Putu Williams doesn't know how to be offensive to people. She never is. And this bill was the subject of, I think, a robust consideration by all members of the Select Committee. For it to come back to this House and get a nasty little jibe like that, I think is unwarranted. So I think the member might want to reprioritise his unpleasant quips to something that's more deserved. Mr. Speaker, there was only one part in this bill that caused contention, and that was section 61. And as the member, both members have just resumed their seat, mentioned, this bill originally was part of a statutes amendment bill and was taken out at the Select Committee because of the objections of the Labour members and the Green members to it being included. Statutes amendment bill is meant to have just a small number of alterations to any act. Those alterations are meant to be non-controversial. There shouldn't be anybody getting upset about them. There should be no controversy at all about them. They should not make any policy changes. That way they're entitled to be in a statutes amendment bill. But if one single member of this House disagrees with the inclusion of a provision in the statutes amendment bill, then it doesn't proceed. And that was the situation with this. However, we decided, and I think it was a mark of goodwill towards the Minister actually, who'd signed this off to go on a statutes amendment bill, we agreed that instead of just throwing it out, that we would progress it as a separate piece of legislation and enable it to proceed. What we didn't suspect, though, was that the Minister would use that as an opportunity to reinsert section 61 back into this bill, the very piece which caused the controversy, which caused the submitters to come to our committee and say this is not the policy intention originally, this will take away our right to appeal a decision that they believed they had. So that's why we decided we would remove it from the bill, because that wasn't meant to be the intention of it. I think from Paul Foster-Bell's contribution just now that the intention of Minister Joe Goodhue is to put section 61 back into this bill during committee stages. I think that would be a really serious breach of the faith that we had in the process and the goodwill that we showed towards the Minister by not just chucking out all this stuff in the first place, which we could have done, given how, as I outlined before, the provisions of a statute amendment bill. We decided not to use our ability to trip the Minister up, tempting though it may be, because that's not the way that parliamentarians should behave. To go back to the intent of the rest of the bill, because as I say, that was only one section that caused the controversy. The rest were completely in order, and we support them. So a person can't be an officer of a charitable entity if they've been convicted of tax evasion or a similar offence under the Tax Administration Act of 1994. To apply for an application for registration as a charitable entity, that can be treated as withdrawn if the applicant refuses or doesn't respond to a request for information or another notice from the Chief Executive. And the third point was to correct a 2012 drafting error. So those four clauses of the Charities Amendment Bill originally formed Part 3 of the Statutes Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, can I just comment on the tone of the submitters that we had, all of whom were focused around section 61 and in opposition to it. Instead of having the organisations led by Huia and their lawyer Sue Barker, instead of having those organisations coming along to the committee, anticipating constructive engagement, which is what you normally get with a select committee, it was very clear that those organisations were feeling quite abused and quite battered by their disengagement from government. They weren't feeling at all as if they had the ear of the minister or support from the backbenchers or any engagement at all. Oh, the minister's woken up at last. Well, I know what the Select Committee were told, Minister, and you can ask your colleagues, and we'll see if they want to be upfront with the Minister about the way. Well, they might be scared that they'll lose yet another contract. Well, let's not go down that path. Let's not go down that path. That would be very tempting. Your colleagues are all tempted to make a contribution here. I think if they're looking for that spot in Cabinet that's coming available early next year, it will be wise not to comment, not to respond to that question from Minister Joe Goodhue. They all said that they felt disengaged, that they weren't given any respect from the government. They were treated as if they were a contractual arrangement if they were providing services, rather than a genuine partner in trying to progress the issues they care about. The other charities, in addition to Hui and Sue Barker, who made representation, were really appalled that they had been given no notification at all by either the department or the minister about the proposed change. It was only through the eagle eye of Hui during the Statutes Amendment Bill that this was drawn to their attention. They felt cheated. They felt as if further costs were being imposed on them. Their rights, as they interpret the law, were being taken away from them, and they were pretty scathing of the whole process, actually. Mr Speaker, I think all of the members of the committee felt pretty disappointed that the charitable and voluntary sector who made those submissions were feeling in that state. We have always regarded ourselves as New Zealanders as respecting volunteers, as respecting charitable organisations, and of ensuring that as you look across the spectrum of people who do stuff in our community, you recognise the paid workers and you recognise the unpaid workers and the organisations they're part of with the same level of respect. That is certainly no longer the case under this government. The other thing that's obvious is that the National Party members are becoming more and more sensitive to criticism and more likely to push back against organisations that raise questions or challenges. I don't think that's a healthy way for a genuine partnership to be maintained. There is a lot of power in a ministerial role, and if that power isn't used responsibly, then we will have organisations that are scared to speak up, scared to criticise, scared to raise concerns, because they know that their contracts will be vulnerable. They know that they will be targeted in future through a quiet word from the minister to the department, and suddenly they're out of work, suddenly they lose their contract. This should not be the situation. In our country, we should not have any organisation that's scared of a minister and scared to speak up and raise concerns. What sort of democracy is that, where we have a situation where people are cowed because of anxiety about ramifications of raising issues? It felt a bit like a war. It felt a bit like the sector was saying, here's increased cost. The policing cost recovery amendment bill was one such issue that was raised with us as part of the sector feeling overburdened by the current regime. And with this bill, even though they supported the other parts, the resentment towards having what they saw as their legal right, and we agreed with them, taken away without any discussion with them, without any notification, caused offence. I will be very disappointed if the national government does decide to reinsert section 61. The department told us that there was a serious disagreement about the interpretation. That does not justify a change going into the Statutes Amendment Bill, and the Minister has been round this place long enough to know that. This is not an opportunity to put things on a train that is passing by just because it's convenient. That we should be very protective of the ability we have to change things in a Statutes Amendment Bill as long as it complies with the law. We support the rest of this bill. I hope we're still able to support it through the next stages of the House.
Sorry,
thank
the
you,
Minister's
Mr
time
Speaker,
has
for your
expired.
attention.